The Red Robin podcast is powered by Budget Tyres Auto Centre, the only car specialist trusted by supporters, players and club officials. Head down to Leeds Road and check them out for all your motoring needs. Hello and welcome to the last Red Robin podcast weekly of 2023, and it's been an absolutely fantastic season both on and off the pitch for the Robins, with Hull Kingston Rovers reaching the final of the Challenge Cup and the season-ending playoff semi-finals. Joining me for this very special podcast is a host of 𝗕𝗂𝗡𝗴𝗏𝗧, as my band of podcast regulars join me to answer 5 very important questions. Question number 1, what is your season highlight? Number 2, what was your biggest disappointment? Question number 3, who was your favourite player? Question number 4, which was your favourite game? And most importantly, question number 5, your hopes for 2024. So, of course, we've got Steve Till, James Purling, Graham Turner, Dan Craft, Karl Smith, and Scott Solway join us. One person who was going to join us, but unfortunately cannot join us tonight, is someone who's featured regularly on the podcast since its inception, and that is Craig Eskerett. Craig was recently diagnosed with motor neuron disease and is now embarking on his own battle to overcome this terrible disease. Craig has a very young family and is only a whippersnapper himself. I mean, it's unbelievable news. He's a massive Robins fan and he follows the side home and away. If you follow him on social media, you know he's already had a host of video messages wishing him well in his journey and his fight against motor neuron disease. And bless him, in his quest to get better and do whatever he can, he wants to raise awareness, and that was his first thought. So it's credit to Craig. That was his first thought, and that's what he wants to do. Craig, if you're listening, I know you're going to be listening. Me, everyone on the podcast, the whole of the Red Army, we are right behind you, and we are sending you our love. And if there's anything that anyone can ever do, just make sure you reach out, because the Red Army family is vast and wide, and we're here to support you, mate. So, yeah, Craig, let's hope we can do this together here, mate. Right, let's move on to some club news. 𝗲𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗧 signing from the Dewsbury Rams, League One Player of the Year, signed a 1-year deal with the option of another. Scott, I'll start with you. I mean, it's great news, isn't it? You're signing, obviously, a promising talent, although I say he's 24, so he's not the youngest of players. He's on a 1-year deal with the option of another. I wonder if Willie Peters having a look at him to see what he can do, how he fits into the full-time environment again. Obviously, he was previously at the Huddersfield Giant. It's not his first taste of Super League and professional rugby league. I wonder if Willie Peters wants to bolster the ranks. But I tell you what, if you're signing a Player of the Year from any team, it's a good sign, isn't it, for the Robins?
Fantastic. Yeah, I've got to admit, I don't know a lot about the kid, if I'm being totally honest. I've seen his name bandied about here and there, and it was only at the Super League Awards last Tuesday, which I was honoured to be at, that I saw his name come up and he was nominated to be the League One Player of the Year. And I looked across the table at a couple of Rovers officials and I just smiled, and he was still officially a Dewsbury player then. But I think back then, last Tuesday, we had a couple of smiles across the table, knowing that he was very close to being announced as a Rovers player for next season. He is 24. He's been there. He's been around a little bit already. You should say Huddersfield. I think they have a spell at Bradford as well. I think he might have done as well.
Yeah, he's done around a few teams, hasn't he?
Yeah, so he's been there, seen it and done it, but never seemed to have kicked on at any club he's been at. Yeah, he's dropped to Dewsbury Rams and he's clearly not only been their Player of the Year, he's been League One's Player of the Year as well. So there's certainly a good player in there somewhere. And I think Willie's just said, you know what, it's worth a punt, isn't it? And I mean this in the nicest possible way. It's probably not going to cost a lot on the cap. So you get him in for a year, have a look at him, see what he can do. And if he's half decent, then he's got another chance of a second year, hasn't he?
Yeah, Steve Till, are you excited about 𝗲𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏?
I'm not excited by him by virtue of the fact that I know very little about him. Dewsbury, we've had a couple of good signings from Dewsbury years, and so if he's as good as those lads, I think was it Tom Garrett?
Yeah.
You know, sadly he left the game, but Yeah, the pedigree's there till next gen, but he's going to have to be patient, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we don't expect him to come into the side straight away, do we? Of course, with Matt Parcell and 𝗕𝗂𝗏𝗏 there in front of him. Interesting to see where he features for the side season. James, we were talking about, do we feel lost now that the season's over? Of course, though, there's 3 more games to go in terms of International Rugby League. England taking on Tonga over here in the Northern Hemisphere. Mikey Lewis called up to the squad. 𝗕𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏 admitted due to him having to have shoulder injury, so he misses out, and I do think he would have been included that squad if he was able to be. Interestingly, Jordan Abdul, who's featured in England squads previously, he's unfortunately picked up another injury. He got a broken finger in a semi-final defeat to Wigan, so that ruled him out of that game. But I tell you what, James, with Jordan Williams being suspended for the first 2 games, although he's still included in the squad, which is another debate altogether. But it looks like Mikey Lewis will be leading the England side on Sunday when they take on Tonga at St Helens.
Yeah, it does. It's going to be a great opportunity for him to showcase his talents on a big international stage. So yeah, I hope it goes well if he gets picked. Be interested to see who plays in the halfback with him if he is selected. I think Karl Smith's in the squad, isn't he? So I think he'll probably get a nod as well. So no, I think for the future of the English game, I think to have quality players like Lewis and Smith, doing really well at the clubs and getting onto that international stage, bodes well for the future of the English halfbacks. We've always had pretty good halfbacks. The best in the world. Roger Millward certainly springs to mind. So yeah, good luck to them both.
Yeah, definitely. And talk about International Rugby League. Elijah Brown, Sophie Banks, Carla Nolan and Lois Brown, they helped the England Community Lions to a 2-0 series win over Serbia. They've had a fantastic time out there. And of course, the women's side are taking on Alton Raiders this Sunday at Odsal Stadium in the Championship Grand Final. So all eyes on them to see if they can take the silverware. And then I think as well for the PDRL side, Connor Lyons representing England and coming away with the Man of the Match award against Wales. So it's great to see that people at all levels, at all different aspects of the club, are getting international recognition for their performances. Dan Kraft, we saw it was officially announced that Danny Maguire has joined Castleford. Of course, he's joining Rowan Milnes and Sam Wood there, who've signed deals to play for the Tigers. It was also announced that Jimmy Kinehorse is to join York. And then it was officially announced that Johnson, Ryan, Walker, Kennedy and Schneider, of course, many of them we know have departed the club. Dan Kraft, quick one with you. Danny Maguire joining Castleford as assistant coach. Apparently got sounded out as a head coach. He turned that down and now he's joining him as the assistant. What's your feeling on how it's all just gone about, this news that Danny Maguire, a player who served the club admirably in some dark hours for the club, then part of the revolution in terms of being assistant coach and taking us up to that next level? What's your feeling on how it all sort of panned out in the end for him and his announcement that he was leaving?
Yeah, it all feels like a bit of a sour note, doesn't it? I think the fact that he'd been with us, he obviously came as a player, more or less saved us, didn't he? In that season where we nearly got relegated, where London ended up actually going down. That drop goal against Cass was massive, wasn't it? In Golden Point, I think he kicked a 40-20 and then knocked the drop goal over. So yeah, that was a big moment for him. But it's just the way it ended, especially with. If it is true that he's falling out with Willie Peters, it'll all come out in the wash, won't it? These things always do. But it's just a sad note how it's ended because he has been a great servant to the club, especially his time as head coach last season, blood in the youngsters, putting his faith in the youngsters. I do think it's interesting how he's not taking the head coach role at Cass. That's a measure of the man sort of going, yeah, I'm not going to jump in feet first. I'm going to sort of bide my time. I know I might not be ready for a full head coach's role. I think that shows a bit of credit, give him a bit of credit that he's decided that this isn't, I'm not ready for it yet. So, keep going, learning my craft.
Yeah, and Karl, Rhys Lovegrove is on his way back to Craven Park. It's not been officially announced yet, but although the press have reported it, Rhys Lovegrove heading back as academy head coach. Great to see him back at Poorhouse Lane.
Yeah, definitely. It was fans, but it wasn't. So, although confident yet,
Yeah, Karl, your internet is crazy, so I ain't got a clue what you just said, but I probably agree with what you've said anyway, because I know you well enough. Right, let's go on to these questions. And I tell you what, it is a special podcast because it's a chance to have a bit of fun, but also it's a chance to reminisce on what has been ultimately a great season for Rovers. I mean, Graham, when you look at Willie Peters' first season as head coach, has he exceeded expectations? Because pundits wise, many people tipped Rovers and Lee, if you throw them into the mix, to be down at the bottom, fighting relegation. A Challenge Cup final appearance, fourth place finish in the Super League table, defeat in the semi-finals of the playoffs. I mean, as a fair season as head coach, and also not only fair season as Hull Kingston Rovers head coach, head coach his first season, it's been a pretty good one for Willie Peters.
Yeah, absolutely, Johno, and as well in not his homeland as well, so he's had to adapt to coming over to the UK as well as first head coach role. So has he overachieved? We didn't have any track record to judge him on, so I think now he's set a benchmark for us that's created a level of expectation for next season. And I don't want to jump into that too quickly in terms of your questions, but in terms of a first season overall, barring the disappointment at the very, very back end a couple of weekends ago, I think it's been an excellent first season for him. As I said a minute or two, and I think it was Cookie last week said it, the challenge now is that the pressure that brings now of expectation, and now he's getting a squad that's his squad. People will judge him on that, and results are the only way that people get judged at that professional level. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and if he can replicate and or go one better next season in certain areas.
Yeah, we'll come on to hopes for 2024 later on. James, let's start on a high. Season highlight for you.
Oh God, where do you start? I think I think there's been so many. I think if you asked us at the beginning of the season, where would we like to be come this time? I think if you said to us, would have been in the playoffs, got to the playoff semi-final, got to Wembley final, you'd have snapped somebody's hand off. I think expectation was probably get to the playoffs. That would be a sign of progress. We achieved that, and the fact that they did playing such good rugby, there was a sort of didn't sort of have team to have too many injuries, fortunately, compared to the previous year. I mean, obviously there was a couple in terms of Abdul and Cope, but I think there's just so many, and I think the fact that we're able to exceed expectations, as you said, people had us written off pre-season as relegation fodder with Lee and Wakefield, to get to a grand final, semi-final, playoff semi-final, and get to Wembley. I think for me, it was fantastic.
Yeah, Steve. If you pick out one moment, is there any one moment that stands out for you as a highlight?
Yeah, the drop goal at Headingley, and I mean the second one. My highlight was winning that cup semi-final. It proved something. It proved that we could handle the pressures of a big semi-final.
and it was the joy that it brought to everybody. You know, I was just looking around the Rovers fans that day and just looking at the smiling faces. I was with an ex-racing journalist colleague who works for one of the national newspapers, big Rovers fan, and just seeing the joy. I'd never seen anything like it. I'd never seen anybody react. I'd never seen him. He's a fairly staid and serious fella, but he was leaping about with joy. And as were all the Rovers fans, I think that was the season highlight amongst many. But for me, it was that moment when the drop goal went over and the joy of everybody thinking, we've got another trip to Wembley.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was Graham's season highlight. If people recount his tale of being stuck on the M62, broken down. So the result might have been a highlight, but definitely not the day. But Scott, I mean, it was a special occasion, wasn't it? I mean, I suppose, and like you said, we'll come on to hopes for 2024. We need to get away from the fact, I suppose, that a semi-final victory is a highlight of the season. It's almost, that's the same as a quarter. It's just part of the journey to get into the final and a victory. But there's no doubt that Headingley day, although it was tipping down with rain, the fact we'd beat Wigan Warriors and went through the adversity of Mikey Lewis having to fill in at fullback and all that went on, and then to win with a drop goal, it was a special moment. And you know, Steve's right, the celebrations that we saw at Headingley is, I suppose, everything, not just why you support Hull Kingston Rovers, but it's why we love sport as well.
Yeah, I've got it down as my season highlight as well. Everything that Steve says, I totally 100% agree with him. It's down as my season highlight, of which, as we've said, there were many. There were many, season highlights. It was a very, very good season from Rovers. The only thing it lacked was a bit of silverware at the end of it. And somehow we need to find a way of getting over that line, somehow be able to lift our first piece of silverware in the future. I know that'll probably come under the hopes for 24 as well, and obviously beyond 24. But that's where we need to be at. We need to understand that, as you just said there, John, a semi-final is just part of the process of winning something. And by winning a semi-final, you don't win anything. But that moment when Schneider got that ball, me and my lad were just there watching it, and I think everybody's going, no, too far out, and he hit it so cleanly. And just that moment of, there was like a pause watching the ball, but it seemed to take an eternity to go through the post, didn't it? But the way it just the reaction of the Rovers fans when it went over, and when everybody just jumping on each other and going mental was just crazy. And I got a ticket for a friend of mine, lives in Nottingham, and he's a rugby union man, to be honest with you. And he said, I've always fancied going to a game of rugby league. So I had a spare ticket, so I give him it. And I met him after the game, and he just couldn't believe it. He said, I've never, ever witnessed an atmosphere like that. And he's been to rugby union internationals at Twickenham watching England, and he's been to the Six Nations games. He said, I have never, ever witnessed a crowd so passionate and so dedicated to be at the club. So much so, and I was even thinking about buying a season pass and coming from Nottingham every game. That's how dedicated he is. He couldn't believe the passion of the Hull Kingston Rovers supporters that day.
Yeah, there we go. Hull Kingston Rovers converting people left, right, and centre. Has anyone got anything different for a season highlight? Dan Kraft, and I guarantee, is it to do with beating Lee at any point?
Wigan at home, first game of the season.
Yeah.
I'm going to go away from the Cup so far because I thought that was the obvious one. I like to go a bit left field. But, it was, first game of the season, Channel 4, I think we near enough sold out, didn't we? Or unless we did. Not too sure on that one. Just the atmosphere was just really good atmosphere. We demonstrated that in that game for me, that we weren't just there to make up the numbers that season. Everybody had tipped us to be bottom few, bottom 3, bottom 4. We demonstrated that day that we can play with the big boys. We turned on a performance, didn't we? And to be honest, the other one that I thought a lot more people had mentioned was the 40-0. But for me, that's not. You look at it. Take away the fact that it's them bin dippers. We should be beating the bottom sides convincingly, shouldn't we? Which we did. So for me, it was a nice day out. Had a few pints, beat them 40-0, but we should be expecting that. So the Wigan game at home for me was quite a, yeah, I enjoyed that because I think, you know, going on the back of last season, yeah, we did finish the season on a high, beating them at their place with the kids, but it just sort of faded out, didn't it? Petered out the season. So to start at home to Wigan, who have obviously gone on to win it, for me that was one of my highlights this season.
Yeah, I'm going to go slightly left field because I did predict that some, you know, what's been already talked about would be the highlights of the season. I'm going to go a bit left field because with mine, I'm going to say my highlight of the season was the announcement of the new board of directors and the way it's propelled the club to a position that we haven't been accustomed to for a long time. And what that announcement did, and the people and the calibre of the people who came on board, has almost made Hull Kingston Rovers stop being a bit of a joke club, and it's actually made people take notice, and people think, actually, no, this is the real deal. So it goes hand in hand with what happens on the field. Of course it does. But for me, the announcement of the board of directors, and then also the what's happened since then off field was probably one of my highlights of the season. Discounting, of course, everything that's happened on the field, the jubilation of the semi-final, seeing Hull Kingston Rovers at Wembley, going toe-to-toe with Wigan, you know, all this kind of stuff, you know, of course. But I don't know, Graham, what, you know, it has sort of propelled us into a level now where the rest of Super League, especially, you know, not just supporters of other clubs, but pundits, etc., it's almost like we are taken seriously once again.
Yeah, I agree, John. The on-the-field stuff is important. The off-the-field stuff is equally important as well. It's often unseen and unnoticed by a lot of fans, but because it's been so public, I guess we've all seen what's happened, who's come in, and it does carry that credibility. I think you're right. It does bring us into a different language that people talk about us now, and the on-the-field performances are justifying certain credits that we get, but the off-the-field activity as well is also creating a lot of noises behind the scenes, and now with the backing of the board, again, this, you know, the solidity that brings, the stability of a good season under our belt, everything's pointing the right way for us. It doesn't feel like there's any anything that's going the opposite way to where we want to be. So, look, this is only season one. Long may it continue, obviously, with the backing of that particular board and the experience and expertise that they can bring to off the field, and couple that with on the field success, then everything's gearing up towards success for the future, hopefully. And with Willie Peters in place now for a year, he's got a year's worth of experience under his belt in Super League, in assembling his squad, hopefully learning from games where we've come up short, and a couple of those have been mentioned already. So hopefully learning from those, and again, just taking that final step towards that silverware that I think it was Scott mentioned a few minutes ago, that is, I think, what everybody's craving now and working toward.
Yeah, it's 100% the Holy Grail. Karl, I hope you've sorted yourself out, because I'm going to come to you for the next one. What was your biggest disappointment of 2023?
The obvious one. It's the one that would have, should have, would have won. You know, I know. Just really slowly do it, and so you can see earlier on, you know, we're making massive shining off the field. Ultimately, it's voting.
Karl, your connection's shit, so I'm going to cut you off there. I'm going to go to somebody else. I'm going to go to Dan Craft. Biggest disappointment of 2023?
Biggest disappointment for me in terms of, well, it's a game and it's Salford at Magic Weekend. For me, I think we were going so well going into that. We sold, was it the second most amount of tickets? for that. We more or less filled that Gallagher end, didn't we? But it was the fact that the bubble sort of burst then for a bit. It sort of brought us back down to earth, didn't it? We lost Sue, Batchelor and Coote, all long-term injuries, and obviously Coote retired. I think Mikey Lewis probably had one of his worst games in a Rovers shirt, and that's when he started that little phase where he was just got out the cheeky sort of stage and just became a bit of use of a better phrase, a knobhead for a bit, didn't he? He sort of settled himself down now, hence why he's probably got his England call up. But for me, that was just the moment when you sort of left the ground a bit deflated. You're thinking, here we go again. It's all Kingston Rovers starting the cycle of disappointment again. Luckily, obviously, we bounced back from that. But at that stage of the season, it was just a bit of a low point, I thought.
Yeah, and of course, Batchelor suffered a really serious injury there, and it wasn't, the expectation was a lot higher than what the players delivered in that performance, and maybe it was that sort of bringing us back down to earth. I mean, Steve, what would you say your biggest disappointment was of the 2023?
Losing Danny Maguire. I think whatever has happened cast a cloud over the season, and coming when it did, all the news falling out before the playoff semi-finals. I think Danny, I spoke to him a few times while he was in post, and I also spoke to his dad a couple of times, and he seemed very happy. The whole you saw his reaction. We go back to that semi-final. You saw the reaction of the pair of them, Willie Peters and Danny Maguire, when we won that semi-final, and it's just left me with a little bit of doubt. Also because Danny Maguire signed Brett Delaney, or brought Brett Delaney in as defence coach. I hope we're not going to lose Brett. But it just puts a little bit of doubt in my mind. And that was the biggest disappointment. On field, I agree with Dan. That Salford match. I mean, we didn't lose it by many. We lost, I think, was it 26-16? So that was a big disappointment. But the Danny Maguire situation left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. And I don't know who's to blame. But Danny has thanked the fans. He thanked the other players, but he left Willie Peters out of his statement, and that spelt a lot to me.
Yeah, James. I mean, I suppose it was quite interesting, wasn't it? Willie Peters, all the news that came out about Willie Peters wanting to pick his own coaching staff. So it's almost like this was imposed on him. But then Steve alluded to the fact that when you look at the celebration, semi-final celebrations, they look like brother in arms. You couldn't see a more jubilant pairing. I suppose what's left supporters scratching their heads a little bit, James, is the timing of the announcement that Danny Maguire, well, not the official announcement, but the leak into the press that Maguire would be leaving in the build-up to one of the, if not the biggest game of the season, and the result and the performance has then left a lot of supporters then reflecting on whether that has played a part in how we ultimately suffered such a heavy defeat against the Wigan Warriors. And, whether it's the biggest disappointment, obviously that's Steve's, but it is a big factor in, for some people in terms of why the Robins didn't come away with a victory against Wigan in that semi-final defeat. And it just could have been handled a little bit better. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it could have been, and I think we spoke about this before on the podcast before the semi-final. That it just seems typically Rovers that something comes along before a big game just to upset the apple cart and just sort of throw things off kilter. We compared it to the other clubs in this semi-final, and the sort of just the only news coming out of them was all positive. Catalan signing out the Brutus, Wigan signing Luke Thompson. Nothing from Saints, all you get from Rovers was this sort of media storm. And Did it affect the performance? God, I don't know. It's hard to say, really. I suppose the more you hear about it, you're probably thinking, well, actually, yeah, it must have been a disruptive influence. But then I also think that you had the bulk of that squad who were 80 minutes away from potentially the biggest game of their career. And, I don't know, for me, if I was in that position, I would just try and block out anything that was going to disrupt that preparation and just focus on what's going to happen in that game. I think, we get back to the game. I think it's just one of those games when it just wasn't going to be our day. Harry Smith couldn't hit a barn door from 3 yards all season. Did about something like 60% success rate with the goal kicks. Scored that first try, turned on some steps and said, he'll bang this in from the touchline, and he really didn't miss all afternoon. Yeah, I think it's just one of those days. We got off the shit start, and yeah,
it got worse.
It got worse. Yeah, it got worse, didn't it? Yeah, so in the end, we just thankful it was all over. But yeah, it was disappointing. But for me, probably one of the biggest disappointments for me was the injuries to, well, and go back to what sort of Dan was talking about at the Magic, and that was the injury to Coote, and also the injury that Abdul had suffered. The fact that Abdul had been probably unplayable for the early part of the season, and Luke Hooley's probably still got nightmares of balls coming down at him from great height in wet weather, and then Coote having to retire and just really disrupting that spine. And you look at someone like Lee, who had a very, very stable spine, and how successful they became. It meant that we were, I suppose, trying to sort of put square pegs in round holes again, and perhaps did disrupt us. But saying that, there's one door closed, another one opens. We've got Jack Walker in, who did really well for us, and then if injury hadn't happened to Abdul, would we have got Snyder? Probably not. So yeah, very disappointed that it happened. That to those two, because I think the key players for us. But out of adversity comes some some positivity.
Yeah, I tell you what, James, I had my written down here. My biggest disappointment: we didn't see Jordan Abdul for the full season. So if you remember at the start of the season, he was one of the leaders for the Man of Steel. He was getting points left, right, and centre. He was getting Man of the Match awards. He was mercurial, wasn't he? He was doing everything, and then he was just cut short. And it'd have been so interesting to see Jordan Abdul go for a full season, and whether what happened at the back end of the season would have happened with a fully fit Jordan Abdul. It's who knows, shoulda, woulda, coulda. But it'd have been great to see him fulfill a full season in the red and white of Kingston Rovers, and hopefully, when we come on to hopes for 2024, a fully fit Jordan Abdul features in that. Now let's go on to more positive talk. So question number 3, who was your favourite player? And Scott, I'm going to kick off with you. Who was your favourite player this season?
Where do you start? Where do you start with this question? Who was your favourite player? I think Minchella, for me, and he thoroughly earned the Player of the Year award. He got the Players Player of the Year award. I mean, he was a clean sweep at the awards, wasn't it, for Mini? Outstanding, been brilliant all season. A great leader. I think he will be the next captain next season of that, I'm sure. I can't see anybody else probably taking the reins from him. There might be 1 or 2 candidates, but I think predominantly it will be Mini next year. I think he's been absolutely outstanding all season. He's a leader. He's like that. Something I've said on recent podcasts, he'll take the ball in, he'll defend all day, he'll do all the dirty, gritty work that nobody else wants to do. He's like an old school loose forward, isn't he? He gets in all the dirty work, and he's a decent ball handler as well. He's got a good, he's got a good pair of hands on him as well. Defensively, he's sound, just a good leader. I think he's been outstanding. He's my Player of the Year, but obviously I want to give special mention to Skids as well, to Ryan Hall. Batch has been absolutely brilliant, and he's very unlucky not to make the England squad. I think is James Batchelor. But I want to give a special mention too, considering it's his first season with us, for Sam Luckley. I thought Sam was absolutely brilliant every time he took to the field for Rovers. He carried the ball. He always got over the advantage line. Always landed on his landing gear. Got the quick play of the ball away. I think he's been brilliant. So I'm going to go Mini, but there's a special mention for Skids, Hall, Batch, and Sam Luckley as well for me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Scott, it's a good way to ruin it for everybody else by naming about 8 players there, isn't it? So,
It's impossible to just name one, isn't it? It's so tough, so tough.
No, you're totally right. And to be fair, you know, it has been a squad performance this season. There's been a number of players who've stood out. I mean, Graham, is there anyone in particular for you who's your favourite player?
Yeah, I'm going to slightly disagree with Scott in terms of I think Minnie had a bit of an off part of the season at the beginning, and Peters collared him and took him aside, dropped him for a game or two to challenge him, I think, on his performances. But I completely agree. Since then, he's knuckled down and deserved the accolade. So I'll leave that one to Scott in terms of Minnie. I agree with that. He's had an excellent season, but I'm going to go Ryan Hall purely for his consistency. At the tender age of 35, still learning his trade. I'm going to go Hawley. I think he just brings so much to the squad. Not just the physicality he brings when he's carrying us out of defence, but I think his professionalism that he brings as well. His attitude when he gets interviewed as well. The way he's sort of questioning the reporters on when it's time to retire. I think he's got a glint in his eye when he talks to them about that as well. So I'm going to go Hawley. Yeah. Although it could have been 3 or 4, and I won't spoil anybody else's. I was
going to say as well, though, Graham. Stats wise, Ryan Hall blows most of the squad out the water, and someone who's just, you know, like there's a few players in that Rovers side who will coach his dream. Like literally, I think the player almost coaches the coach in terms of I'll play, I'll tell you when I'm playing, I'll tell you when I'm fit, I'll tell you what, you know. So it must be an absolute dream. Steve, what about you? Who was your favourite player of the season?
I could name half a dozen. You know what? Somebody who does it week in, week out, never wavers. George King. I think he's had a magnificent season. I remember when he came from Wakefield, I have a good friend who's a Wakefield fan. He says, "You can have him," is what he said. And I said, "Okay, then we'll see." And he just keeps doing it, doesn't he? I didn't realise how young he was, and he's got his best moments to come as a prop, as far as I'm concerned. I'm also going to mention another prop that Scott's already mentioned, Sam Luckley, and another kid who I like a lot because, again, he does a lot in defence, 𝗕𝗂𝗡𝗏𝗁. I think first season, he's come over, there were rumours that he was homesick and this, that and the other, but he knuckled down, didn't he? And I love watching 𝗕𝗂𝗡𝗏𝗁 in operation. But you could, like everybody else has said, you could name a lot, you know. But George King and 𝗕𝗂𝗡𝗏𝗁 would be my top two.
And Dan, what about you?
So I think Sam Luckley for me just never sort of took a backward step, did he? He's the hard graft that he puts in that just sometimes goes a bit under the radar, gets unnoticed. And let's not forget, I don't think he was particularly signed as a first choice prop, was he?
No.
I think he's sort of come in and proven everybody. I think he was a bit of a stab in the dark, wasn't he? Let's get him in, see what he can do.
I think, Dan, to be honest, when we signed him, he was probably everybody's 5th or 6th prop. He would have been the prop that most people would have kept out the squad. Wouldn't have been included.
He just seems to have bought into everything, doesn't he? With Willie Peters, sort of, we play the 𝗓𝗂𝗏𝗏 our way, we do this the 𝗓𝗂𝗏𝗏 our way. I don't know if you watched when I sort of, I've liked him all season, but I sort of took to him quite a lot was the end of season Players Awards night. I don't know if you watched it. We got the community award, and he just basically said, "Well, I'm just doing my job. I'm lucky enough to play this for a career, play the game I love in my career. If I can just turn up to a training session or drop, I think he took a checker onto somebody's house or a skater onto somebody else. And I do that. It's half an hour of my day. It's nothing. But if it puts a smile on somebody's face and they go to school and say, Sam Luckley this, Sam Luckley that, I quite like that. think he's just bought into everything what the club's about, and the community and everything. It's just quite odd to see a Geordie playing rugby league, isn't it? But I think we've got a bit of a gem with Sam Lockley.
And how good has it been, Dan? I mean, so apart, but actually to see forwards fit and playing and not having 2-3 props forward, second row, out injured for the majority of the season. We've actually had, and I posed a question earlier on this season: is this one of the fittest packs we've had in our Super League history? Because it's remarkable that, like I said, apart from Sue, that we've managed to field our first choice props so regularly, and it's either credit to Willie Peters for the training regime, the pre-season, or it's credit to the players, or a bit of both, that we've managed to just get them out so often, so many times out on that pitch.
Well, you look at the props we've had in recent years, though. You look at 𝗟𝗡𝗞𝗦. I watched it was on YouTube, bizarrely. I watched it. It was the Doncaster playoff final. He was playing for Donny. It was 𝗟𝗡𝗞𝗦. Jesus Christ. He's how he got a gig in Super League. He's just, he played well against Hull in his last ever game for us, but Jesus Christ, he was a big fat lad, wasn't he? And Willie Peters has obviously driven up the standards in terms of fitness, and it shows with the calibre of players he's got. We haven't got the big 25-stone Tongans, have we? It don't fit his mould, does it? It's the fitness. He wants to get his minutes out of his props. So yeah, I like that. That's the way the game's going, isn't it? And I think he's evolving with the game. Whereas if you look at, I know I don't like to keep mentioning, but the other side of the river, I think Tony Smith's stuck in his ways. He still likes, a bit like Lee Radford, he likes the big units in the middle. But when you're only getting quarter of an hour out of them, and then they're blowing for a tug, they're gone, aren't they? It's no good.
Yeah. Luckily, we don't have to compare ourselves with relegation fodder now, do we? So we'll we don't look that far down. I mean, they must have WD-40 on the next to keep looking up so often. They must have James Purling, favourite player of 2023.
Well, I had written down one guy who's been mentioned, I think, by everybody, and that's Sam Lockley. I won't sort of go through because what everybody else has said again, because it's just expected to be a squad player, just is now sort of probably the first names in the team sheet on the squad. Played I think as many games as the likes of Lewis and the other guy I'm going to go for, and that's Jez Litton. I think Jez Litton has sort of taken his game to a totally different level this season. He sort of, I think if Xavier hadn't been injured, he probably would have been in that England squad for the Tonga series. The fact that could come on and could start a game, look sharp all the time, would play big minutes, fast around the play of the ball, could come on, with 20 minutes to go and just change the course of a game. I think look at the Wakefield game. I think he had a cameo of 20 minutes, scored two tries, and basically changed the whole complex of the game. That essentially made sure we had that home game in the playoffs against Lee. The fact that he's extended his contract by another 4 years, I think just shows how the club really want to sort of keep the likes of him there and build a really decent squad around the likes of him and Minchella and Abdul and Lewis, etc. Keeping them all together, it's going to be bode well for the future. So I think Leighton's got a great future in the game. I think obviously when Parcell goes, I think he's rumoured to be retiring at the end of next season. I think he will obviously become the number one hooker, and then potentially Reece Butterworth's going to be that understudy for him, and he's going to have a great guy to learn off.
Yeah,
he's only about 25 or something.
24. I mean,
24, even doing him a disservice.
Yeah, but I tell you what, one player who I'm surprised not most of you haven't mentioned really is and Graham, I want you to be my sounding board or my sense checker on this, is Mikey Lewis. What an absolute talent we've got in our hands. The fact that he's made his way into the England squad and he's probably, we'll find out on Sunday, pushed himself into a starting position for the national side. For someone at such a young age, someone who's carried the burden of the supporters' expectations in terms of wanting a homegrown 6 or 7 in that position. Many have failed, to live up to them expectations, and to see a player like him ride through a rough spell this season, where he was probably either trying too hard, he was either trying to make things happen, he was either trying to play a game that he thought he should be playing, and to see him come out at the back end of the season and almost lead the side to Old Trafford. And then for me, what capped it was seeing him deliver the speech at the end of the game against Wigan, and to see him pole position in front of every single player, delivering that end of game speech. I don't know, Graham. I think maybe the expectations on Mikey and the pressure on him, like we all almost expect him just to be good, and actually we forget he's such a young player. He's still learning his game, and for me, Mikey Lewis as not maybe exceeded expectations, but he's certainly lived up to them for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of what you said there, John. I think for me, the reason personally I haven't mentioned him in my little bit was consistency, and he's been too spiky in terms of levels of performance for me. I appreciate he's done a lot this season. He's probably in his 4th season as a pro, something like that. So again, as you said, massively learning the game still. Completely agree on, as I say, most of the points there. But I think this season he will have learned a huge amount in terms of attitude, behaviour. We've learned he can adapt as well. When he got asked to play fullback, he's done that admirably. He's also stepped up in the halves as well. I think it helped him when Schneider arrived as well to allow that balance to allow Mikey to do what Mikey can do. And I think that sort of should go hand in hand with not just all about Mikey doing it. But for me, he's had some games where he's been, like you said, possibly trying to do too much, trying to carry the team literally on his shoulders, and that wasn't what's required. He got found out on a couple of occasions where he was ineffective in games. Look at the league game away, first few minutes, etc. Incidents where he's losing his cool and getting wound up by opposition that take away, all that take away from his game that we know and love. So for me, I agree on most of what you said there, but I would want to see more consistency from him on a week-on-week basis. Now, again, that could be injuries in and around him that affect that. But when he's playing in the halves, I'd like to see him with a settled partner and doing what he can do, obviously. But again, for me, recognition he's got with the England call-up, fully deserved. I think he's shown good glimpses of that throughout the season. So for me now, for him next season, it's got to be about consistently high level of performance.
Yeah. And do you know what? I was looking at other sports and I was trying to sort of compare him to somebody else and stuff. The only person I could maybe compare him to, Scott, is Wayne Rooney. Now that's throwing it out there, but in terms of a young player with expectation and someone who's burst onto the scene and delivered to a certain level, and then created expectancy based on that. I'm struggling to look at other sports, but I'm struggling to look at anyone in rugby league who's done that, especially in recent. If you talk about recent history, the last 20 years. I don't know, and I do think Mikey Lewis is unfortunate in terms of him having to carry the burden of expectation on his shoulders.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Maybe the other one that springs to mind now is maybe Jude Bellingham. He was fantastic, wasn't he? Very, very similar to Wayne Rooney, based on the scene, but it's maintaining it, isn't it? Sometimes we see these players are burst onto the scene and they're absolutely fantastic for a few years, and then they go by the wayside and they start dropping into lower leagues and stuff like that. Obviously, that's not going to happen with Mikey, of course. But it's tough for him because with him being the homegrown lad as well, there is a big expectation on his shoulders. every time he plays, he's expected to rip it up. He's expected to lead by example. And we know he's had those spiky moments, certainly this season, when the going's got tough a little bit. But I think sometimes it can be frustrating every now and then when he gives these penalties away and stuff like that. But I think if you try and kick that out of his game, you lose a lot of what Mikey is. And I think it's getting that balance. It's getting that balance of being, getting in and around. Sam Tompkins is an example, isn't he? He gets in and around referees and people, doesn't he, and stuff. But he does it in a way where you hate him if he's playing against you, but if he's in your team, you absolutely adore him, don't you? And I think that's where Mikey is at the moment. But he's got to control it better, I think. You've still got to have that spikiness about him. But the Wayne Rooney analogy is very sick. I agree with that. Yeah, why not? I remember that goal he scored against Arsenal. Remember the name Wayne Rooney. And people certainly remembered it, didn't they? I think we had to remember the name Mikey Lewis. And if he runs out for England on Sunday against Tonga, well, not only is that brilliant for Mikey as an individual, of course it is, but it's fantastic for OKR as well, isn't it? That, one of the halfbacks playing for England against Tonga in a test series is one of our homegrown talents. Fantastic. Yeah, brilliant.
And then over on YouTube, Mr. Hull Rockers, he put Mikey Lewis. If you're an England halfback, you would not want Mikey to get a shot while you're banned. He's a precarious talent and he's quite likely to steal the show. And then Bazza, some great comments so far. I mean, is it worth bringing the number 6 shout of retirement for Mikey? He's worthy of Millwood shirt. I'd maybe give him about 8-10 more years to see what he does before we even enter that conversation. But it's a worthy point to make maybe later on. If this podcast is still going on in 10 years' time, it'll be a great debate to have. I tell you what, right? We've already talked about season highlights, and we've verged on what was your favourite game. Steve Till, what was your favourite game of the season?
St Helens at home.
Ooh, good one. I had that down on my list.
Dan mentioned Wigan at home in the first match of the season. Well, first matches often bring out results that you don't expect, but the St Helens at home, that proved that we were on the upward spiral as far as I was concerned, and I loved the game. Ben Thaler refereed it. He made some kind of random decisions. None better than the one where he pulled St Helens back, gave us a penalty, and we're all wondering what's he giving the penalty for. But that game for me was by far my favourite because of it. Just proved that we were well and truly on an upward spiral, and we beat the world champions. Yeah,
it's a great one. It's probably one that's overlooked in terms of the course of the season. Karl Smith, great to have you back finally. If your microphone's shit this time, you definitely are being cut off. What was your game of the season?
My game of the season was not necessarily because of the scoreline, was the Salford game after the Challenge Cup final. I know they played St Helens straight after the Cup final. But the Salford game, the league game after the St Helens game was my favourite game. For the simple fact is, the season was on the line. Then it was do or die, wasn't it? And I think as a club, that result moved us forward, and I think that shows the strides we've made over the last couple of seasons. I think in recent years we'd lost that cup final, got beat by Saints, and then got beat by Leigh. That'd have been season over, done and dusted. So for me, that was a favourite game of my season.
Yeah, it's a great point. Dan Craft, what about you? Favourite game of the season?
For me, I've gone Huddersfield away.
Fucking hell.
One of the final games of the season. Wow, did you have that?
No.
I don't think nobody's had that one, Dan.
No, just Huddersfield away. I just think it was just it was one of the most enjoyable away games I've been to for a long time. Just the whole atmosphere around the place. It was 2,500 of us turned up. We more or less filled that away end. Like Carl said, the season was on the line at that stage. We had to win. It was pushing for that 4th place. And we had to win. It was just a really good atmosphere. There was good performance. We nearly threw it away at the end, but it was just that digging in, and it was great. Like for me, it was just a positive it felt positive. For the past few seasons, there's been an air of negativity about the place, hasn't there?
Well, I was going to say, Dan, to be fair, Huddersfield away in a game that many Rovers fans really look forward to it.
No, we're awful there, aren't we? Yeah, it was just a good atmosphere. There was no, even though everybody had a drink, there was no idiots lobbing bottles and stuff, like you do get sometimes. And for me, I just enjoyed it. I think, like I say, it was just enjoyable to go and watch Rovers play well, win at a place we don't usually win, and just, good atmosphere.
Just have a good day out.
Good day out, yeah.
Graham, favourite game of the season? Oh, sorry, Graham, I've muted you.
Yeah, do I have to do everything wrong here, John? I'm going to agree with Steve. Saints at home. That for me proved that the Wigan result wasn't a fluke, and it proved we could hold our own with the big boys. And it instilled in me a confidence in our system, our belief, our performance. That was one of the first times when I sort of really understood what the whole KR way is, around that effort, working hard for each other, process, etc. So for me, that set us in good stead. I think when we veered away from that, we the results didn't match up. But agree with Steve completely. There's a couple of highlights around Hull away, senior team at Wembley, but that for me was a good benchmark of what was about to come for the season, and where we're pitching ourselves as a team and as a club now. It's mixing it with the Wigans, it's mixing it with the St Helens. That was for me.
James?
Like the guys have said, I think it's hard to choose. There's so many. I mean, there's obviously the Catalan game at home when we'd beaten for the first time in about 10 years or so. But for me, I'm actually going to go for two games that were quite similar. And for me, just really epitomised probably the grit and the determination that we've got in the squad, and something that we've probably been lacking in the in previous years. That if we'd have played in these games, the squad we've had in previous years that have played in these games would have lost them. And it was the Castleford away game on Sky and the Leeds away game, where they weren't exactly the best quality games, but we basically played. It was an ugly games, and I think in years gone by we'd have lost those games. Castle would got a new coach. Andy Lass had been appointed full time, so there was expecting a bounce from them. Leeds. Last year we went to Leeds, and that's when the season started to go tits up. But we basically dug in, and basically somehow managed to get a win. And obviously the Leeds game was the debut for Brad Schneider, and we just got a glimpse of what he could do, and how it sort of then, as he sort of developed into that role in halfbacks, how he sort of helped push us on to great things.
Yeah, the Wigan Challenge Cup semi-final is an obvious one. I've avoided that one. I mean, we've probably skated over the fact, the 40-0 victory. Maybe it was so early on in the season where not necessarily because of who we beat, but because of some of the tries that we scored were absolutely joyous, scintillating rugby league. It was just sometimes pure attacking rugby league, and I think the tries were scored there. And then if you go to maybe the other side, I agree with you, James, that for me the 1918 victory over Leeds was quite a pivotal victory, bearing in mind we had the semi-final up next, and it was Brad Schneider's debut, of course. Scored a try, and of course he got the golden point drop goal, which he got after. Don't forget as well, he hit the crossbar, went under, and he still came back and managed to land the point, what counted. I mean, for me, that was a victory that was needed in terms of being able to do the dirty stuff and still come away with victory. And don't get me wrong as well, Leeds had chances to win that, but for our defence, we managed to hold out, we managed to front up. Aside missing Jordan Abdul, Mikey Lewis, Kane Lynette, and we still managed come away with. And I don't think we'd have won that Wigan Challenge Cup semi-final without winning that game. It was almost like we needed to do that, and we did it dirty. It was chucking down with rain, stood in the Western Terrace as a supporter. It was horrible. It wasn't great. And you know what? I suppose as a supporter, it's not always about the glamour, is it? Sometimes it's about the dirty stuff, and it's about being there when it was shit and adversity and all that. And they're the victories that sometimes are a bit more sweeter than the big ones. Although I will like to see Rovers win a trophy. So if you're listening, players, coaches, we would like that glamour. But yeah, for me, that's where for me that Leeds one was probably one of the games of the season, which then leads us on to expectations for 2024. Scott, I'll come to you. And no doubt everybody's expectations are the same. But it'd be interesting to see what Scott you want from the club and what you want from the team in 2024.
As I said earlier, getting to semi-finals doesn't win you anything. We need to push on and we need to lift a trophy. We've come close this season. I still think we should have beat Lee at Wembley, personally. You know, there was, for whatever reason, we didn't, of course. But we need to push on. We need to lift a trophy. We certainly can't afford to go backwards. That would be a negative. Like Salford last year got in the playoffs, didn't they? This year, they haven't made the playoffs. So we can't afford to go backwards. We need to push on. And if this power board that we've got in place really are serious about taking OKR to the next level and taking us on to be a regular top 4 team or even a top 2 team on a regular basis, then the club need to push on, not only off the pitch, but on the pitch too. Now, whether that includes signing a marquee player or two, well, that's probably not going to happen next season. But, you know, I think that's if you're Wiggins and, you know, your Warringtons, or I know Warrington have struggled this season, but if your so-called bigger clubs are signing marquee players, I think we have to go with them, because that's the only way you're going to get in a way to challenge to win trophies alongside them. If you can't beat them, join them, so to speak. So whether that's something that's applicable in the future, I know the club have muted that it is possible that the marquee players could be signed in the future. I think that's an important step, but also keeping that, you know, that local bond of what OKR's about, you know, the community club, the community and the fans and the unit that we all are. I think as Paul Sewell said in his speech at the Player of the Year Awards, if we all sing from the same hymn sheet, we can achieve great things. And he's right. But sometimes you just have to sort of push the boat out a little bit. You don't want to be just the also-rans, do you? Oh, they've got to another semi and they've got to another final, but they've lost it again. You know, we've got to get over that line somehow. I'm desperate, absolutely desperate. Just even if it's just one trophy in my entire life. I mean, I was there through the 80s as a young lad, and I saw win all those trophies as a young lad. But I'm just desperate. Even if we just lift the Challenge Cup once or the Super League trophy once, I'd be happy. You know, I'm sure all of us would. But we want a sustainability, don't we, in the club? And that's what I'm looking for: sustainability and progress, really.
Yeah, and Steve, when we talk about hopes for 2024, I suppose Willie Peters and the squad this season have maybe lifted our expectations, because I don't know. Do you agree that anything less than a Challenge Cup final and a playoff semi-final is that a bad season for the Robins next year?
I've written down here that the one thing I don't want is that what we don't want to be is another Castleford, Huddersfield or Salford, and that's pretty much what Scott's saying there. You know, I mean, Cass and Huddersfield won what they call the hubcap, didn't they? The League Leaders Trophy, and failed after that, and both teams haven't really achieved much in terms of trophy winning. So it would be great to win a trophy. I'll go back. I'm going to go. I've done it before on the podcast, so I'm going to do it again. I'll go back to the late 70s, early 80s, and we won the 𝓡𝓸𝓫𝓲𝓷𝓼 Trophy. That was our opening trophy in those days. We were absolutely delighted. Then we won at Wembley, and absolutely delighted. And then you think, well, what comes next? and eventually we started to fade. I just hope that we can carry on an upward curve, and that in my opinion means winning a trophy next season. And of the two trophies, the easiest to win is the Challenge Cup, and the fact that we lost it by 1 point this year. I think we lost it with a penalty that didn't go into touch. I think that's how close we were. And yeah, like Scott says again, if we can get to Wembley, let's go out and put on a show, because a lot of clubs do that. They say you've got to lose to win, as it were. Well, let's bloody win next time. Everybody everybody will be onto us now. Everybody will be. We're not the team that's going to try and beat one of the top teams. We're one of the top teams that everybody else is going to try and beat. And so we've got to keep on that upward curve. And I think by virtue of that, I think a trophy would be nice.
100%. Dan, if we did the same as we did this season, would you be happy? Dan, you need to unmute yourself.
There we go. Again, doing your job, aren't I? Same as Graham said. No, when I was on last week with you and Graham, I said anything less is mediocrity, and we're accepting. For me, Challenge Cup, yeah, it's nice, but obviously if in first round we draw St Helens away or Wigan away, we get knocked out. I was
going to say the caveat to it is that other teams who have done not as well this season will be expected to do better.
Yeah. So for me,
and there's only so many teams who can win a trophy. There's only so you know, not everybody can do better, because if everyone did better, then.
But yeah, exactly. For me, the cup's a nice bonus, isn't it? Let's say if we get knocked out in the first round by Wigan away, it's understandable, isn't it? But like this year, we got Batley at home. Yeah, so great. The league for me is the important one, because it's consistency over the season, isn't it? If we finish fifth next season, it means somebody's improved more than us. And if we're sort of the way we're talking and the way we're saying we've got this power board, we're signing players, we're doing this, we're doing that. If we're moving forward and if we're to move forward and we finish fifth now, well, then we've gone backwards. Somebody else has leapfrogged us in terms of improvement. And for me, that'd be a disappointment. So anything below fourth for me is it's not a negative season, is it, if you finish fifth? But do you know what I mean? Especially if we finish outside the playoffs, for me, that's a major step backwards.
Yeah, it's a great point. Graham, I want to get your opinion on 2024. Would Rovers winning the league leaders shield but failing in the Challenge Cup and then ultimately failing in the playoffs, would that represent success?
I think it would, because it'll be an improvement on the season this season. I think you want to, yeah, like we've said before, like the lads have said already, you want to show that you can take that next step forward. And look, as mentioned before, everybody's going to be wanting to win the trophies, and Mr. Hull Rockers again. Wigan, Saints, Cats are all in the same boat. There's not enough trophies to go around for everybody to win them. So nobody's going to give you them. So you've got to earn the right to win it. And if you finish top of the pile at the end of the season, you deserve to be there after 27 rounds. So fair play. Would it be disappointing if we then didn't kick on into the playoffs? Well, if you won the League Leaders Shield, you've got a home tie, you've got a week off. But the chances are you're going to have some, one of the big boys coming to your patch to play. If you got knocked out there, is it disappointing? Yeah, I think it would be. I think an area for improvement for me, just jumping sideways a second, Johno, is when we look at our home form, it's been very good. And barring Warrington, we've beaten everybody this season. And the key area where I think we need to improve is if you look at the top 6, obviously we're one of those, we didn't beat any of those other 5 teams away from home. So that for me is an area for improvement to prove that we're on the right trajectory of mixing it with the big boys, is going away to Wigan and winning, or going away to Saints or Cats or Lee and or Warrington, and putting in a performance that comes away with the 2 points. Because I think that's where there's an area of improvement for me that's needed. The consistency at home, I think we're good at home and we accept that. But when we come up against those big boys who are competing in and around us at the top 6, we haven't pulled away with a victory like this season. So for me, that's an area for improvement. And I think if we can do that, then people will really start to take notice. If we can pick a couple of them wins up and maintain the same level of performance we've done at home this season, that should stand us in really good stead.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. James, hopes for 2024?
Just really echo what Graham was saying. I think, for me, that if we're going to step on to the next level, that's what we need to be doing, is winning away at the other clubs around us in the top 6. Because by doing that, you're not only helping yourself, you're actually pushing them back as well. But for me, I think, in terms of the hope for 2024, I think we've made some really, really good signings for next season. We're bringing in 𝗕𝗂𝗱𝗴𝗲𝗁, we're bringing in 𝗕𝗂𝗱𝗴𝗏. I'm so looking forward to seeing 𝗕𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏 play. I mean, he's been absolutely outstanding for Catalans this year, and for me, it's really sort of seeing those players gel and sort of buy into the ethos of the club and sort of keep that squad, that close-knit squad that we've had this year, and keep it going. Because I think, we've had the closest squad we've probably ever had in the last sort of few years, and I think it's really shown in the results and the performances. It looks like they all really want to play for each other, play for the club, etc. So bringing in all this new talent, I think it's again indicative of how far the club has come. I think it's only about 3-4 years ago that we were scratching around at the end of a season trying to pick up who was available that nobody else seemed to want. And that's no disrespect to those players that came in, because they're sort of were brought in to do a job. But now we're getting on the front foot. We're starting to lay down markers for long-term contracts for our key players for 3-4 years, and they're wanting to stay with the club. We're attracting the likes of Gildart. He's been playing in the NRL. He's won grand finals with Wigan. He's an England international. 𝗕𝗂𝗱𝗏𝗏, New Zealand international. As I said, 𝗕𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏 won a grand final with Penrith. They're the sort of players that we want to be attracting. And if other players in the future can see the way the club's going, then again the club becomes an attractive proposition. And I think the other thing is just really, hopefully, we can stay clear of injuries. It'd be great to see Abdul on the pitch for the majority of the season. Just because I think he's got that extra bit as well. I think he needs to be on there, and it's maintaining that squad cohesion and that sort of squad keeping us injury free, and then that will help push us on.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose, Karl, my hope for 2024 is that we give, or the supporters give, Willie Peters and the players, I don't know, the pressure's not built up at the start of the season, because there's no doubt that we've seen it's a long old marathon in it this season, and it doesn't necessarily mean that if you get off to a bad start that you're going to get off to a bad finish. And I just hope we have a bit of patience, because the worry is with the expectations that Willie Peters and the squad have created in terms of them finishing in a Challenge Cup final place and being the semi-final of the playoffs. The expectation is that we'll hit the ground running, especially like James said, with some of the signings we've made. But my hope for 2024 is that the supporters just bide the time, give the players the benefit of the doubt, and we come good at the end of the season. And I'm sure that they will, because Karl, you can't. There's no doubt that Willie Peters, the players, they've built up the expectation levels, and as good as Rover supporters are, there is sometimes when we do we're a bit short, and we sort of lose our shit a little bit too quick, and we start panicking, it's all from a good place because we want the best for the side. We want the best for Hull Kingston Rovers. But I've just hope we have a bit of patience come the start of the season when who knows what might happen.
No, for sure. That's in a funny way. That's the downside of having a successful season, is it? It's human nature that people want more success. Build every year. But for me, we've been great this year. My expectations for 24, it's like everybody else. And I was saying a second ago, we want the best of everything, don't we? So can easily say, well, League and Cup double. But in reality, for me, it's building them blocks and them tight games this year, like the semi-final and the playoffs and the Challenge Cup final. Yeah, we got blown away in that semi-final game. We lost the Challenge Cup by that one point. For me, it's building them blocks to make sure we're in them big games year upon year. And then the more you're involved in them games, the more chance that you can deal with the situation and the occasion, and hopefully that will get us over the line to get a trophy. So for me, the expectation is the obvious thing to say is silverware, but it's being able to compete in them big games year in, year out. That gives you the drive and the focus to win them big games to bring the silverware back for me. So it's all about building blocks, in my opinion.
Yeah, and who would have thought Hull Kingston Rovers would be 2 wins away from playing the World Club Challenge? Who would have thought that a few years ago? So it's funny how things turn, isn't it? But that's it. The last Red Robin Podcast Weekly of the season is now complete. I have got a few heritage casts lined up this season, or before the start of next season, which will be very, very special. So keep your eyes peeled for them because they are going to be great listens. A massive, huge thank you to everyone who has watched the podcast on YouTube or listened over the course of the season. Also, a big thank you to Budget Tyres Auto Centre for their continued support throughout 2023. Remember, they are the only car specialists trusted by the players, club officials and supporters of Hull Kingston Rovers. And lastly, thank you to my podcast panel of loyal regulars who have joined me over the course of the season and give me their opinions on Hull Kingston Rovers. But for one last time, please remember to live, love, laugh and be happy.